Rence. What's going on, man? Good to have you.
What's good? Thank you for having me.
So you're in Eagle Rock, not too far from me, huh?
Yes, sir.
You've been in LA pretty much for the past few months now.
Yeah, yes, for many months now.
Yeah, too many months maybe.
I
Uh,
know.
yeah, so yeah, I've been hanging out in Highland Park as well. But Eagle Rock's a very cool neighborhood, so it's not a bad place to hang out.
Mm-mm.
So dude, you've done some huge things, so I'm really interested in hearing your story. Why don't you take us all the way back and tell us how you got into music to begin with?
Absolutely. It's kind of a long and winding road.
Well, that's what
Um,
the podcasts are for.
yeah, exactly. Um, I had always been really interested in music. My parents worked all the time. We used to live in Washington D.C. when I was really little, and so I had a lot of babysitters, nannies, etc., who were obviously I was like zero, but who were younger, who were like 20 years old to 25 years old, who kind of had their, ears to what was popular both in the United States and around the world. So a lot of my music intake from an early age came from just being in the car with them, listening to XM radio before it was Sirius XM, and like CDs and all tapes and all sorts of different things that they would share with me. And so when I was really little, like 4 or 5 or something, I asked my parents if I could start playing the violin, to which they said yes. And I did that for like 6 or 7 years. Um, and then I got sick of that. But in order to stop playing violin, my parents' deal was, okay, that's fine, but we want you to keep this up. You clearly are not terrible at it. And they're like, okay, pick another instrument. So then I kind of hopped around. I did a year of guitar, a year of bass guitar, a year of drums, a year of steel drums, all different things, some keys, all sorts of stuff. Um, and that was when we were living in Washington D.C. And when I was 12, my mom took a job in Seattle, and we moved across the country to Seattle. And that's where my focus on music kind of really began. In When I was in DC, it was always something I was interested in, but I was really young. This is like age like 5 to 12, so it was like,
Yeah,
fucking
super young.
being in music and playing stuff, but really like not choosing what you're playing. It's more just like learning from a teacher or in a
Right.
school orchestra or something like that.
Sure.
Um, and then I moved to Seattle and kind of entered this music community there. There's such a blossoming arts community there, as there has been for a long time, which is something I didn't have in Washington, D.C. So I got to Seattle and I had two incredible music teachers. I was really lucky to go to a middle school and eventually to the same high school where the arts was a focus. It wasn't an arts school per se,
Hmm.
but I had amazing instructors, one of which became my mentor and role model for music. And this amazing teacher, Jill, was a touring musician, understood production, and so was teaching myself and my friends who opted to take music classes things that were practically useful in music, like how to EQ and what production is and what Pro Tools is, and like all these different things. So
Sure.
yeah, she
Was that
really
middle school or high school?
it
You said.
it was the end of middle school and the beginning of
Okay.
high school.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and in high school, I was definitely interested in music. I was taking a lot of music classes and starting to make music on my own with friends and by myself. But was still doing a lot of other things, was still loving playing sports all year for different, baseball, soccer, what you name it, basketball. Was really interested in academia as well and doing well in school and maintaining my social life and all sorts of different stuff. But music definitely I felt drawn to it. I think not enough at the time to commit to it, but I was definitely drawn to it. So I started working, worked at an athletic club and some restaurants and stuff so I could make money and build a studio at my dad's house in Seattle,
Nice.
where I would then bring in local artists and producers and stuff just to like put myself in the mix.
Hmm.
Um, at the time I was making music, but not so much for myself. I didn't feel like I had a lot to say.
Mm.
Um, I was always trying to be cognizant of like, and this is something I learned from my music teachers over the years, just to be purposeful with what I was creating,
Hmm.
and to only really do it seriously if I was serious about doing it.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, So in the start, I was producing for other people and DJing for hip hop acts when they came to Seattle, and then eventually leveraged that to say, okay, well, I'll open for you on your tour and DJ for you, but let me do a set for 15 minutes before yours, and kind of like making
Nice.
those moves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so music was, was a serious part of my life, but it wasn't until I was going to college that I had to make a decision. And basically, I applied to a lot of different schools. Some I applied to music programs, and some I didn't. And just kind of wanted to see like where things fell, like what is in the cards for me.
Right. Right.
um, I definitely felt like I didn't have the strongest music like application,
Uh-huh. Right.
for getting into these programs. Like
Sure.
I felt like I was lacking some of that, so I wasn't sure what it would look like. And then in the end, I had to make a decision of whether I wanted to go to a number of schools on the West Coast, but be general, undeclared,
Hmm.
undecided major, or if I wanted to go be in the art school at NYU. And something just pulled me that direction. I wanted to be in New York City, so I did. And I traveled to New York. I moved to New York, and it was there that I met a whole community of artists who took themselves seriously, which is not necessarily something I had experienced really. That just showed me that this was a possible career. So from there, put my head down and got to work.
Nice. So, yeah, I mean, the circle that you hang out in really, I think, can affect your mindset and what you believe
Hmm.
is possible. So you get to, I mean, you had a quite a journey though. I mean, even if you didn't know that you were taking music seriously, obviously you loved it from a early age.
Right.
You were
Yeah.
you were using it as a recreation. At the least, you're playing steel drums. I don't know many 5-year-olds who are playing steel drums.
I was like 10 when I played steel drums.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that was a little later, but still, that's
But
like fifth
still, yeah.
grade. Yeah, that's like fifth
That was
grade.
me. We live in DC. I'd go out to Rockville, Maryland. There was like a group of people that played there, and it was like all 40-year-olds up, and then me, just
Nice. So
banging
you
on the
get out
steel
in the
drums.
like get out in the park with the guys jamming out there.
Hmm.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you get to college, and but you were doing some gigs and already kind of laying some groundwork, at least getting some show experience and kind of like network experience. It sounds like in
Hmm.
high school, as far as like the industry goes.
Right.
What in college were there some key people and moments that kind of inspired you and went like, oh, these guys, like, they're doing this, or they say they're about to do this, and were there some key moments like that that kind of made you really start taking it more seriously?
I think there definitely were. Yeah, like you were saying, I did have some experience with shows and a little bit in the industry, but in Seattle, it felt very localized. It didn't really feel like a part of the larger music industry from where
Mm-hmm.
I sat. It
Right.
felt like I met all the people that were doing music in Seattle very quickly. It was a
Right.
small community, a really beautiful New York to be a part of, something bigger. Um, and Yeah, when I was in New York, I my parents were always supportive of me becoming a musician, but with a caveat of a backup plan.
Sure.
Um, and so which makes sense. I can't
Yeah.
I can't fault that.
Sure.
Um, and I'm glad I had it at the time. So basically, I started to find any and all music adjacent things that I could. I worked at a music publishing company for a semester. I worked at a music branding company, at a booking agency, at a recording studio in New York. Um, just like kind of surveying all I could of the different angles of what makes up this thing we call music and its surrounding
Yeah.
industry. Yeah. So, um, if nothing else, I was taking those positions just as like a let me see if this is something I don't want to do. And I was,
Right.
and a lot of it was, like
Mm-hmm.
like my position at the publishing company really helped me understand music publishing, but also taught me that I don't want to be a music publisher. I want to be
Mm-hmm.
making the music that gets published.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the studio was the closest I got to a place where I felt at home.
Sure.
Producing, it was my first love in music. It's what I first started doing when I got to Seattle and started learning about production. Before songwriting, before singing and performing. So I did feel comfortable there. And I went on to work at another studio in Brooklyn later on in my college career and get free studio time and build relationships and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But there were definitely a few people that I looked to as inspirations at the time. One was just my contemporaries at NYU.
Mhm.
It's a fun story. Like one of the first couple weeks, I don't know exactly when, but in the first few weeks of NYU, I was in my dorm and a group of other students came to my dorm, but not to see me. Our dorms were like groups of 4 people. You had 2 people in each room and they were
Mhm.
connected. And they came to see either my roommate or my suite mate. And when they came over, I was working on something, making a beat or whatever. And they came in and kind of introduced themselves. And I was at the time never one to just like show my work to somebody, you
Mhm.
know, offhandedly, but they asked about it. They're like, oh, what are you working on? I showed them. They really liked it, showed me that they were also working on music. And that was how that friendship kind of created itself. And from there, worked on lots of music with lots of close people at NYU. And beyond my immediate friends were teachers and mentors. So I had an incredible teacher named Rich Hendler who teaches entertainment law at
Mm.
NYU, who I'm still very close with. I'm doing a performance for his entertainment law class this Friday
Nice.
over Zoom. And he was a huge influence for me, definitely took a liking to me. And he has a history of teaching some very esteemed people at NYU, most recently Lauv in his class before me,
Nice.
was close with Lady Gaga when she was in the area around NYU and taking classes and stuff. So it definitely made it feel more real. I
Yeah.
performed for his class. He, out of the kindness of his heart, was reading my retainer agreements with lawyers before I had a lawyer, and just like really took me under his wing. So that's definitely one person. And the other is this guy, Jake Ottman, who works at RCA. He really took me in and let me, you know, intern at his recording studio in Brooklyn, which was instrumental in my ability to graduate NYU, because I graduated a year early. I tried to do it as quickly as possible because I wanted to take advantage of some opportunities that were coming up. And the only way to do it was to find a way where I could both do school and do music at the exact same time, because I was out of time.
Right.
I was working in restaurants in New York in all my other hours and trying to sleep at least a little bit and do all my schoolwork and everything. So some things had to come together and be done at the same time. And
Right.
that studio Slumbo in Brooklyn was where that happened. So I definitely owe him a big debt of gratitude as well.
Nice. So that was like a work experience kind of type
Exactly. Yeah.
apprenticeship kind of college credit.
Exactly. College credit. And I was working at the studio in Brooklyn, kind of like scheduling sessions for whoever wanted to use the space, whatever RCA artists he was booking, as well as I lived near the studio. So if there were any issues, I could go over there and take care of things. And the beautiful thing was that came with studio time whenever the studio wasn't being used. So that was a place where I created a lot of the songs that then came out in the subsequent months, etc.
Nice. Yeah, I did something similar in high school or in college. I needed to graduate. I didn't want to do a whole other semester, so they were nice enough to let me do an internship at like a production studio, and it turned out
Mm-hmm.
to be some of the most valuable. I
Mm-hmm.
tell people every day, like internships, as far as if you're in college or probably even high school, an internship's the best way to learn about what you want to do.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
invaluable.
It's not necessarily through the, general education classes. Yeah.
Sure, sure, yeah.
Like,
I mean, and it's probably worth more on a resume, to be honest, than a degree a lot
mm-hmm.
of times, especially if it's in
Mm-hmm.
the entertainment world. So you're in college and you're hustling and you're inspired by your crew and some of your teachers and the studio you're working on. Um, so at what point do you kind of get things together and say, okay, I'm ready to start putting out some music and actually like really trying to push it?
Well, it's a good question. It kind of about a year into my NYU career, I was kind of figuring out where I was and like how to take advantage of where I was. And
Hmm.
like, you need a direction in order to know how to get there, or at
Sure.
least know how to go in the right way. So
Yeah.
um or at least put steps in the right places. So yeah, I think it was about a year into that time when, so I applied to NYU to be in this program called the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music,
Mm,
which a lot of my later friends that I made later were in, but I didn't get into that program. I was devastated at the time, and looking back, realize why I didn't get into that program. It makes sense. But I was fortunate enough that another department at NYU called Performance Studies like grabbed my application before it was just tossed out. And this was a new discipline. It had been a graduate program. They had just expanded it to include undergraduate. And so I ended up in this program, which took me a little while to realize the value of. At the beginning, I was like, I don't really understand what this is or why I'm here and why this pertains to me.
mhm,
But as I stuck with it, I learned the value. So I was taking classes about performance of race, performance of gender, certainly musical and theater performance and acting as well, but more about performance of everyday life and the transmission
mm,
of affect and all these different things. So
hmm,
um, the beautiful thing about that program was it was a low requirement program, which
mhm,
just meant that you were encouraged to find classes in other departments to take alongside your curriculum in the
mm,
program, which meant that I got to take some of my favorite classes within the Clive Davis School
mm,
or within the Tisch or within any of the acting schools or the film school, or a lot through the Stern School, those, I don't know, Stern, which is like the business school and the law school and all these different things, where I got to like kind of build my own education, which included stuff like entertainment law with that professor, which I otherwise wouldn't have had access to.
right.
So it was kind of like a,
You had more flexibility to cherry pick all the little things that you liked from each program.
exactly, exactly, or anything that felt worthwhile and felt like I was going to need it, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyways, to answer your question more directly, about a year after I got there, um, I linked up with Michael Ryan, who is one of my managers currently. And he was at Syracuse at the time, and I was at NYU. And we had been best friends since we were like 5 or 6,
Mm,
up until we were 12. And then I moved away, and he moved somewhere else, and we kind of split and did our own thing. And then we got back together, and just having a conversation after we had reconnected, I was like, hey, you know, I'm making music. I think I want to start releasing it. He's like, no way, I want to be a manager in music. And so we kind of just started working together. And for a while, it was just the two of us putting out music, and a lot of cold emails and, you know, trying to reach out to blogs and whoever we could. And I released a project, an EP that did virtually nothing for my career, but I learned a lot from it. That was called For Better or Worse. And then I released, in my second year at NYU, I moved to Brooklyn and was working on a bunch of music and released this EP called Pink. And that had the song Baby Blue on it, which is my most popular song to date. And that was the song that, irregardless of our pushing efforts, it caught on to some blogs and playlists and whatever. And then things started from there.
yeah, huge. I mean, so that song just, if someone jumps on Spotify right now, it's got over 13, almost 14 million streams. So was that a yeah, was that a uh, serendipitous kind of like the right blog got it, or was that the product of good promotion on your end, or both, or how did that pick up steam?
Right. I'd like to say it was a product of good promotion, but it was not. Um, that was, and also that was not like, I made that song with all the other songs that were on that project. I didn't know, I knew it was the single, I knew it was like probably the most sticky song on there, but I
Hmm.
didn't think it was necessarily a 13 million stream song. I just thought it was cool, as
Yeah.
I think of all of my music, you know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
um, and we put it out, and Indie Shuffle was the first blog to pick it up just
Hmm.
randomly. It wasn't one that we had submitted to or had any contacts at or anything. But that's the power of good music, right? So
Yeah.
it got picked up, and I guess Indie Shuffle and a few other blogs that, you know, were certainly super relevant at the time, led to a lot of industry phone calls and meetings and all sorts of stuff. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that song went huge, and then was that the song that kind of were you able to leverage the success of that song into the things that happened going forward? You know, you're on Epic Records now, I believe, and so but did people start shooting you emails and everything after that?
Hmm. Yeah. I don't think that was the only thing, but I think that was certainly a part of it.
Hmm.
Demonstrated success, right?
Right.
Um, at least, did it once, could in theory do it again.
Yeah.
Something I ask myself all the time. um, that song has grown consistently trended upwards since its release, which is
Hmm.
a special thing. It's not like it went to 13 million and then, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
go to 13 million quickly. It's just been trudging along. So as that song grew, was still releasing lots of music with my small team at the time. It was just Mike and I for a long time. And then we added a lawyer, we added a second manager. Um, but Baby Blue was part of it. But then we put out some other singles and other records as the year went on. And to follow with what you said at the end of that, yes, that was the tipping point for emails and phone calls. And I took every single meeting. I'm that type of person. You always take the meeting. You never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah.
So it was stressful. I was in school, like trying to do finals and stuff, and meeting with lots of record labels and publishers and stuff in New York and Los Angeles. But good problems to have, of course.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool because you're surrounded by what it sounded like some good mentors. So, if
Mhm.
you kind of had, not to say that college is free, but along with your college tuition, you got some free, probably advice from some pros who've done it a few times.
Right, and that advice was worth the price of admission,
Yeah.
on its own,
Yeah. Yeah.
without all the classes. The classes were obviously super valuable, but without those people, I don't know, wouldn't be here, or I wouldn't be in a position to succeed.
Sure. So you got this huge single. You're continuing to put out music. Where do you think you get the influence for your sound? Because there's a lot of different elements in there. There's some pop. I feel like there's some R&B. There's some alternative. There's some electro, indie, hip hop. Um, Tell us a little bit about your influences.
You know, I I want to try and answer this question as honestly as I can, and not with my media training and all that,
Uh-huh.
all that
Yeah.
shit. But like, to be honest, my sound is the collection or summation of all of my life experience and musical influences so far.
Mhm.
So that sounds vague, but if you're me, you know exactly what that is.
Sure. Sure.
Um, it's I entered the music world professionally, and even before that, started to become a music consumer right during the democratization of music. Right, so
Hmm.
I was still buying physical copies of things for special albums to me, but that wasn't my only means of listening to music, right? I was all over LimeWire and the Pirate Bay and all
Hmm.
sorts of stuff online, you name it, and kind of just grabbed as much music as I could. I was a huge music fan. I still am to this day. So my thought process was, I can have everything. Why would I not want everything? And
Yeah.
then it became a giant collection game of grabbing any music that I thought was good, or someone had mentioned to me, or I heard once on the radio, or I saw in a blog post, and just kind of aggregating that into my own collection, and then really sifting through the collection to find out what I liked. And what I realized I liked pretty early on was artists that did their thing without regard for what was cool or popular at the time.
Hmm.
Um, and those are the T-Pains of the world. Those are the John Mayers of the world. Those are the Sades of the world, etc. The Kanye West music antics aside, the Kanye West music personalities of the world.
Yeah.
Um, and so that I realized that's where I wanted to be, kind of in the trailblazer position. So it makes it tricky when I am making so many different kinds of music and trying to synthesize and really figure out what feels right to release, and what does my fan base want versus what do I want versus what does the label want versus all of these
Hmm.
considerations. But I would put my sound certainly in the sphere of modern popular music, but
Yeah,
only insofar as that definition is expanding, right? Post Malone is pop music today, and so are Migos, you know?
exactly. Yeah.
And Dreams by Fleetwood Mac is on Pop Rising because of
I
the
know.
TikTok challenge. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
I do.
everything is there. So I put myself right there with them.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's the genres are blended more than ever, even within songs. You know, so you
Mm-hmm.
named a couple different kinds of artists, and then there's artists like yourself who sound like them all wrapped up in one. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and you know, I think when you, because you've released a lot of music this year, you know, you have a kind of a continuous output of singles, and then going into 2019 also. I think if you're consistently releasing music too, I imagine it's you know, if your fans don't hear it on one track, they might hear it on the next one. You know what I mean? So as long as you're
Yeah.
consistent, you know what I mean?
Something for everyone. Yeah.
Right, right. So that's great that you've been able to put out music so consistently. Speaking of which, your newest single, "Strawberry Blonde," just recently dropped, and you are featured on a new song called "Help." Did you want to tell us a little bit about both of those?
I'm happy to. Um, yeah, both interesting records, and I think they follow the lineage of what we were just talking about. They're just two separate yet connected explorations of creativity and sound, like all of my discography so far. Um, Strawberry Blonde is just a fun record. There's not. It's not a. I spent a lot of time this year releasing really deep records that were close to my heart and close to my soul. And Help is one of those. But Strawberry Blonde was literally just made to be a fun piece of music that everyone involved with really liked. And the hope and the feeling was if we enjoy this and like moving around to it and bopping to it, then maybe other people will too. Um, Strawberry Blonde I did with another artist named Zachary Knowles, who's fantastic. He signed to the Fader. We did it a while ago in that studio Slumbo that I was telling you about.
Mm,
So
hmm.
yeah, we started that song there together. We met that night, and that's what happened, and became friends from there. From then onwards, but the song always stuck with me and stuck with my team. So we figured, you know what, it's been a while. Let's put it out. Let's give it to the world. Maybe somebody else will enjoy it too, rather than our Dropbox links. You know what I mean?
Right.
So and Help is kind of totally different thing. Help is a record by the incredible Sarah Barrios, and one that she asked me to be a part of. Basically, the record, it tries to kind of tackle the stigma that exists around asking for help when you need it, and just opening the door to conversation, and hopefully helping people feel heard, or feel like they have the ability to be heard when they want to be heard. So yeah, that's obviously a much more serious record than Strawberry Blonde. But I'm always looking for opportunities for my music to affect and enact change in people's either mental state or lives or what have you. So whenever I hear a record that can do that effectively, like this one, I thought it did. Whenever that comes across my plate, I'm always happy to take a swing at it and see what I can add to it.
Yeah, something for everyone, like we said.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was interested in hearing the story about how you and Noah Cyrus did a track last year.
Mm-hmm.
Expensive was the track
Absolutely.
name.
That is the story of persistence. No other way to classify it. Basically, um, I wrote that song and created that song with two close friends in New York while I was in school. They were not NYU people. I was also working at a lot of different studios and making, connections and working with other writers and producers or what have you. And we made this record and we finished it without Noah Cyrus. It was done. It was complete on paper, but to me, it wasn't complete in my
Hmm.
head. And I couldn't really figure out what it was missing for a long time. So it just sat, as many records often do. I'm sure all my music collaborators know, and contemporaries, like, so making so many songs, it is a game of making a lot to release a little. So a
Mm.
lot of songs get shelved or put in files and whatever in folders. And that was one that happened to, except that people kept asking about it. I always play my stuff for people when I'm done with it, just to get reactions and genuine feedback. And people kept asking about that song. Oh, what happened to that? What happened to that expensive song? What happened to that ooh song? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I never really feel like I finished it, even though on paper we finished it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that it was missing someone rather than something.
Mm.
And I told the producer Pom Pom, who I love, at the time I was like, I'm gonna try and get Noah Cyrus on this song. And this was like way before label prospects or anything. Like there was no like direct line from me to Noah Cyrus, so they kind of
Mm.
like laughed it off. Um, and I went in my Michael Jordan mentality, and
Yeah,
like
nice.
was like, I'm gonna figure this shit out.
Yeah.
And then it just became a kind of team effort of my managers and I figuring out how we could get it to her. We hit up her manager and her publisher and her A&R, and even like any friends that we had that might have a connection to her or know somebody that did. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually the dots were connected, and she happened to, at that very moment, be looking for things to be a part of, and was looking
Mm.
for new records that she could be a part of or support in some way. And this one came across her, came across her, and she loved it, and she did it like on the spot basically, and became just a good friend. Like obviously I was incredibly grateful that, and somewhat surprised, but mostly grateful that she did the record. But beyond that, she, showed me around in LA and introduced me to people and did the video, and it was just like such a team player. She performed with me at my first show in New York later on. It was just
Oh yeah.
couldn't have asked for a better, partner for my introduction to the real LA part of the industry.
Nice. Yeah, I I love that you said you went into your Jordan mentality. Have you seen the new docu series The Last
Oh
Dance?
yeah.
So good.
Hmm.
So inspiring.
Incredible.
Love
Yeah.
that. Love
You
that
ever feel like
mindset.
you can't get anything done in a day? Watch a little episode. God,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
perfect.
Yeah, it's a little inspiration juice, make you feel like you're not doing enough. Well, Rence, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. What's next, man? Are you've been dropping singles? Are you going to continue to drop singles this year or into the next year? Or do you got a EP LP coming up?
Um, Honestly, all of the above. I'm working on, as always, tons of new music. I think the best stuff that I've made with my favorite people, some by myself and some with others, and getting ready for that. Really starting off the year with that. It's kind of a crazy rest of the year here. The election is tomorrow. I'm not sure when this is airing, but the election is November 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Thanksgiving, and then we have everything shuts down for Christmas and New Year's. So really starting to prep songs and videos and assets to get ready to roll out at the top of next year,
Right.
which is probably a few singles, but then an EP and eventually an album. Assuming all of the pieces fall together, you never know how these things work out, but just
Sure.
doing my best to create the best shit that I can and believe in it and see what happens.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, we're looking forward to it. If I could just end with our typical last question, we like to ask if you had one piece of advice to offer aspiring artists, what would it be?
Um, I think I would offer, hmm, I think my advice is to make sure you really love doing this before you get into it seriously. And that may seem obvious, but I don't think it is. I think there's a difference between liking doing something and really loving it, really having a passion for it, because, you know, my career is hopefully just getting started, and I've already experienced a plethora of highs and lows, as I think a lot of my contemporaries and friends in music have. So there will be moments where this job is really easy to love. When you're playing a sold out show, it's super easy to love and easy to motivate yourself. When your song gets on that playlist you were hoping for, or you reach a certain milestone on streams or socials, it's like, cool, this is awesome. But there are there are lows to balance the highs when those things aren't happening, or when your creations aren't what you want them to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So my advice is to make sure you really love doing this for the sake of doing it, and not for the results, because you'll never be in control of the results. You'll always be in control of the process. So
That's great advice. Yeah. The also it's loving it for the music, because I feel
right.
we're
Yes.
you're talking about music school. I remember in college we had a speaker come in one day, and he said, if you want to be rich or if you want to be famous,
Get out of music.
there's way easier ways to do that than music. So so those shouldn't be the motivating factors. I mean, they might be bonuses sometimes, but not the motivating factors, because there's a lot of easier ways to get both.
Oh, absolutely. And also, like, of the entertainment industry, music makes the least money, right? Of film and television and all those things. Like, this is not the place to do it for the money. On top of that, if you want to be an artist, I don't know the exact statistic, but something like the top 12 earning artists make like 85% of the income in industry. So like, those spots they exist, but you know, that I think it's a dangerous goal to have.
Sure.
So be in music because you love making music and you can't live without it. And you won't. Bring me backwards.